I travel a lot, but when I'm home, I go to the ocean every day. And, whether even if it's not the ocean, the birds, I'm very connected with the birds, or even noticing this, the subtle shift in the wind. Sometimes, like, when you're just, thought happens or something happens and the wind responds in a certain way, those little moments of being in nature, whether it's the messengers like the snake I saw today, or a couple days ago, a gopher coming in and out of his hole, and then me being like, let me feel into what this messenger is saying to me before I go onto Google to type in gopher spiritual meaning. Because I will do that, but I will think about what it means to me first.
I do that all the time.
Yeah.
Welcome to the EasySpeak Speakeasy.
You've unlocked the door to unfiltered mental health and wellness conversations.
Yes. My favorite place in the whole wide world, the EasySpeak Speakeasy.
Yes. Welcome to a special episode today of the EasySpeak Speakeasy. I'm your host, Diana, here with your other host, the OG KG.
That's right. Christy Glenn coming through. We're going to be having these unfiltered conversations about mental health and wellness, straight to your eardrums or your eye holes if you're watching us on YouTube.
Eardrums and eye holes.
Both.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so this episode we have a special guest. Do you want to tell our listeners and viewers about Sam?
Absolutely. I'm very excited for us to welcome our guest today, Sam, who we connected on the all-powerful LinkedIn. And Sam is a serial entrepreneur turned certified breathwork practitioner and keynote speaker. He is the author of the #1 best-selling book, Soul Life Balance, and the host of the Soul Seeker podcast. So he is going to bring us lots of wisdom, and I'm sure drop some gems in here today at the Speakeasy.
Yes, I'm so excited. Okay, let me bring him on. And let me not kick him out, because last time I did that, my bad.
We were like, welcome to the Speakeasy, and then we kicked him out.
Sam.
Thank you,
welcome.
Ladies. Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you, and I love the energy, so this is going to be fun.
Yay. Awesome. Thanks so much for agreeing to be on here with us. We're looking forward to this conversation.
Absolutely. And as always at the Speakeasy, we are enjoying a cocktail, although I might be solo enjoying a cocktail today. I'm not sure.
I think you are. I have
fine by me.
I have this that I made that I will not be drinking.
Is it a virgin? Oh, you made it. Are you saving it for later?
Yeah, I'll put it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is
I have water.
Oh, I have my Stanley full of water too.
Yeah.
They were drinking a tequila espresso martini, and I'm excited about that.
Yes. These are good.
Cheers. Cheers. Cling. Cheers to you, Sam. Coming through with a cute water bottle. Hydration station.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
Sam, tell us, I only gave a couple of sentences from your bio, but I'd love to hear directly from you how you maybe came on the path of becoming a serial entrepreneur and how it sort of led you into the mental health and wellness space.
Yeah, great questions for sure. And it goes back to college. I think 22, 23 years old, I got a DUI, and I thought I was like a mess up, a failure, and all these things. And that was really like the chip on my shoulder. And actually, I feel like everything goes back to college, because there were a few traumas that I'm happy to speak about as well before that I kind of just numbed and disassociated and distracted from. And now having to work backwards, kind of processing those as I've been doing the deep work since then. But yeah, long story short, I really felt like I messed up big time with getting a DUI, right? And there were a few people that were like, "Oh, welcome to the club," right? And I was like, "That's not a club I want to be in." So yeah, right. So that was the chip on my shoulder. I launched my first business at that point, and it took off. It kind of took a while to take off, but it took off. And then I was named Silicon Valley's 40 under 40 list, and built the business to $1 million company while working just a few hours a day, and had all these different successes. Yet I was so unfulfilled. I was so depressed, and I didn't know what to do about it. And then a breathwork journey found me. Next, ayahuasca found me. And that was back in like February or something of 2019. And ever since then, I've kind of uprooted and changed my entire life, and really been into spirituality and mental health. And that's how I am here now, speaking on the message of soul life balance on stages, and also doing breathwork journeys, leading those, as well as yoga and some other things as well.
That's amazing.
Amazing. I mean, I have like 12 million questions based on that very short description, but very dynamic. You packed a lot into that, from trauma to, consequences of our actions to, the ways that we work through it and the ways that we find ourselves and align ourselves with who we're meant to be. It sounds like you were able to do all of that amazing work. And then, of course, when you said ayahuasca, I immediately thought of KG and I's journey of wanting to go to, well, I don't know if we're going to where we said we were going to go before, after your experience.
I know.
We've been talking about going to Costa Rica and, having a journey. But
I really missed the amount of like water with pressure from a shower when I was in Costa Rica. But Sam, it's interesting. So one thing that I'd love to talk about briefly is just the topic of alcohol use, right? Because we here in our format, we have our speakeasy, right? And there have been a lot of people who have talked to us or said like, the mix of kind of like mental health and alcohol, and, so many people struggle with alcoholism, and we always talk about drinking responsibly. And like today, like Diana's not drinking, I am. It's gone vice versa. We always welcome guests to drink, but it's not a mandatory thing. It's just, we kind of always talk about that. Many times we hear, because we work outside of this podcast a lot of times with families, and they'll always say like the time where I've been able to like really actually talk about the things that are going on with my kids is like over a glass of wine with like my close friends and whatnot. And so we've kind of created a space where we want to destigmatize the fact that it's all right to drink responsibly or do different things in a responsible manner, and also maintain and have a balance around mental wellness. But it's also really important to know your limits and know if you're going to be drinking, for instance, not getting behind the wheel and other things like that. So I'm wondering if you could give us a glimpse into what that journey was like for you, especially since we do work with families that have youth that are maybe around the age that you were when you had your DUI.
Yeah, great questions. And I do drink, by the way. Just it's a little bit earlier out here, and I'm just coming off like an NLP training. You both familiar with NLP, neuro linguistic programming? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyways, I'm like, I kind of want to just maintain that frequency for now for a little bit, Yeah. But yeah, I would say fast forwarding from what was it, maybe 2010, I think is when I had the DUI, up till 2019. I was still drinking a lot, drinking more responsibly for sure. But I went to a school called Chico State in Northern California, and it's a small school, but very much known as a party school. So Yeah, there was a lot of drinking to have been done in my youth and in college. But, when I sat with ayahuasca back in 2019, that's really when my relationship with alcohol started to shift. I was really into hazy IPAs, and I would say pretty much every day I would have, not every day, but close to every day, I'd probably have one or maybe two hazy IPAs. And it was like trying different beers, and that really had an effect on me in a lot of different ways. And I didn't really realize it till after I sat with ayahuasca. And then that was just like, I'm done. I don't really want this anymore. And I definitely went through a period of not drinking at all for an extended amount of time. And then now it's, a few times a month, and it's just kind of in flow. If I'm out with friends or something like that, and there's a situation, or like you said, over a glass of wine and bonding and responsible use, for sure. But I no longer, it feels like another lifetime ago, like get done with work and be like, okay, now I'm going to have a beer. If anything, for me, that shifted to cannabis. But I don't have like a joint or weed mint or something like that every day. But I actually like working with cannabis more than alcohol because it's more intentional for me, and I can do a little bit of like reflection and contemplation. Whereas a lot of times with alcohol, if it's on my own, it's like numbing and distracting. But as you both alluded to, if you're working with alcohol intentionally and having like a glass of wine, be like, okay, let's just use this so that it can help us bond and connect and just let down our guard a little bit. Like, yeah, for sure, so I hope that kind of addresses what you were asking.
Yeah, it does. Totally. I think, that's exactly what we try to put forth, and Diana actually, and I have actually talked about having a couple of episodes that are around cannabis and around these other types of substances, and that, there are so many different ways. I love how you put it, the working with these different types of substances and different, these are all in some ways tools if they're done right, right? Like I always think about this, I think an easy way to make something that is relatable to most people is around food, right? Like you can use food as a fuel, or it can absolutely go in the opposite direction by either not eating the right kinds of foods, not eating at all, right? So it's all about the way that you think about what you're inputting to your body. And so I think that has really been something that we have thought about in terms of mental health and the realities of people in their mental health journey and in their lifetime. And this is what life is about, right? We're going to interface with all of these different things. And how do we do that with intentionality?
Yeah, definitely. I want to hear more about your sitting with ayahuasca, because there's lots of people out there who talk about their journey and what they experience, and it's always very different, but always super profound and always life-changing from what I've seen, and so what was your experience like, and how did you change after you sat with ayahuasca, as you put it?
Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, a lot of times we'll hear things like ayahuasca is like 12, 15 years of therapy packed into a single night. And for me, it felt like a lifetime or maybe lifetimes of therapy packed into a single night. And the purge, that if someone's listening is not familiar with ayahuasca, it's really grown a lot in the past couple of years in terms of being like quote unquote mainstream. But it's two different plants. It's a plant, vine and a leaf from the Amazon. And the story or the legend is that, a shaman was told in a vision to heal their village with mixing these two different plants together and making a tea out of it. And I mean, that's pretty undeniable with thousands of plants in the Amazon, like, like how would that come about, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Now us Westerners are working with it as well for healing purposes, and it treats so many different things, but there's also like protocols to know about and going about it safely. I'm actually a psychedelic integration coach as well. And one of the things I tell people is like, hey, if you're looking at sitting with the medicine like you would a vacation, where you're like rolling up your sleeves and in that masculine of action doing energy, then it might not be your time, right? But when the medicine comes to you organically, like that's really where the magic is. And I say that because my first time sitting with ayahuasca, it was just so undeniable. It was just calling me. It just brought me there, and I didn't know why. I was also at rock bottom and at that point of surrender. And I remember one specific purge, and purge is typically out of what some will say the north end, but it does come out of the south as well. For me, it was out of the north, meaning vomit, puke. And it was actually a beautiful sensation. Like, you know, we think of those times that we've puked in our life, and maybe we're sick, and especially being hungover, drinking too much. Like, we would never describe that as beautiful, right? Yeah, it's like painful. So a lot of people, it's funny. They're like, oh yeah, I would never want to do ayahuasca because I don't want to puke. And I'm like, that's why you don't want to do it? Like, really? But anyways, like for me, it was just, I felt like I had purged out all of like my self-hatred and my unworthiness and my identity. And it literally felt like a flash, like I saw my whole life just kind of like in a Rolodex, and just let it all go. And I just felt so light, that feeling of lightness. And I remember letting it go, then laying back on my mat and just being like, oh, it was just like this total surrender. And then the journey took me from there. But the medicine showed me so many different things, and I uprooted my entire life. I moved away from Silicon Valley to Santa Cruz, a beach town. I got out of the toxic relationship I've been in. I started to slowly get into a career transition. I started to hang out with people. It took me a while to find like my community of like-minded seekers. And I switched everything I was doing in terms of content, you know, instead of like fantasy football, it was like everything became spirituality, like Gaia. And here we are 5 years later. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. It sounds like it was like such a shift for you. I think the part about, you know, the purging of the self-hatred and other things, that negativity, and I'm just thinking of how amazing that must have felt afterwards to get all that stuff out and to be able to have a renewed perspective, because you're not harboring all of those feelings and those thoughts that go along with them that, you know, inevitably influence the actions that we take. You know, I think that's really amazing. That's really cool.
Yeah, I think of it as like layers, you know. Sometimes it definitely, and sometimes in my own language, I'll say things like, you know, all of it, but obviously, maybe not obviously, but there's always deeper layers to go. And the medicine I've worked with a lot since 2020, after that first time of ayahuasca, is Bufo, 5-MeO DMT. Are you both familiar with that one?
Yep.
No, I'm not.
Bufo is known as to some as like the most powerful psychedelic known to man. It's a 5-MeO DMT, which is different than DMT. A lot of times when we just hear DMT, that molecule is NN. This one is 5-MeO. So it's important to get that distinction, because usually when we hear about DMT, it's like more like, oh, it was a fun trip. I saw some elves or whatever. Like 5-MeO is totally different. It's all about healing. It's very approached as a ceremony. And basically what happens is you're smoking this toad venom. And not to get into all that, but as you inhale, the ego, the identification of self, goes offline, meaning it's almost like going to sleep as soon as you inhale that smoke. And then you're out for about 5 to 8 minutes, give or take. And what's going on when you're offline is that the neural pathways are creating new neural networks, because the default mode network of the brain is turning offline. And this is where we can really let go of different traumas we might have experienced, or habits and behaviors that aren't serving us. So a lot of people feel called to Bufo, one, because yes, it may be called and seem more powerful than other psychedelics, but also it doesn't last as long.
Yeah.
And two, you don't have to relive the trauma. A lot of times with ayahuasca, you'll have to relive it and see it and feel it over and over and over again until you truly surrender. Whereas with Bufo, you go offline and it's just doing the work in the background. And I personally love it because it's the felt experience of I am you, you are me, we are all one, split off in separation as God experiencing itself, and that time doesn't exist, which our ego minds can't understand. But then when you have that experience, it's this remembering and it's this feeling, and it's just an incredible medicine.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, that 10-minute effect is, I think, what really, like you said, really draws people to it, and for me, it when I first learned about it, it just really highlighted just how powerful we are, just how powerful our brains are, right? In the mental health space, we often talk about neuroplasticity and how we're able to shift the way we think and feel because we're exercising different neural pathways, and that the brain can essentially heal itself. And when we're talking about psychedelics, that's like you said, it's a fast track to that, right? We could essentially achieve a lot of these things with, like you said, 10 to 15 years of talk therapy, of diligently working through CBT models and journaling and all of those things, which are all great and awesome, and people should keep doing them, right? Because psychedelics aren't for everybody. But, to know that there are these things on Earth, right? They're here, they're literally growing amongst us, or, living in toads, right? And if we can just extract them, and utilize them, then that neuroplasticity and the changes of our neural pathways can happen so much quicker. It to me, that highlights just how much hope there is in despair, right? That things don't always have to be bad, and that trauma doesn't have to, even though it lives in our bodies, it doesn't have to affect us negatively every single day. And so, yeah, that's amazing. So is that something that, is a one-time thing for most people, or is that something that people would typically do on a regular basis? How does that work?
Yeah, great question there as well. I feel like most people, when they start to work with medicines, like in a ceremonial type way, as opposed to just recreationally with like a friend or, a tripser, like something that's a little bit deeper in that, they usually go through a handful of ceremonies. And I'm speaking from my own experience and seeing a lot of people I work with and friends as well. But there's this theme of like almost feeding the hungry ghost. And it feels like there's just been like, wow, I didn't know this was out there. Now I want to experience everything, right? Yeah. So it's like trying this ceremony, trying that one. Then eventually it gets to a point of like, maybe I'm not actually doing my work here, and maybe I'm now starting to edge into that reckless type phase. But you can't tell someone that, right? They have to get that message for themselves, and that's very normal in the process. I think it's kind of on it's on all of us in the space that are speaking about it to speak more about preparation and integration, and that the experience itself is just 10%. Everything else lies within the integration and the preparation, and knowing that there's other modalities such as a breathwork journey that can take you to a similar place. Because at the end of the day, like, what I think is most important is that people learn how to open up their intuition so that they can find the answers for themselves. Because to your point of psychedelics being like a fast pass, right? It's basically getting you straight to your intuition and your own inner guidance. So how can we tap into that without the use of medicine, or without trying to hire this coach or that program or look for this thing or that thing, and just be able to sit in the stillness to get those answers?
Yeah. That's wonderful. I'm wondering, as part of your experience with ayahuasca, do you feel like this journey towards how you are now teaching breathwork and have developed, seems like a curriculum around breathwork, where you're working with people in different places, as I saw on your website, and workplaces, and then in all different kinds of environments. did that grow from this initial experience that you had, or is it similar to kind of what you just described, where you went through several different types of things and then realized like, all right, I need to like figure out what I'm going to do here to stabilize and do this work on an ongoing way?
Yeah, totally. I definitely have that shiny object syndrome, and anyone that's going to like use the quote unquote label of serial entrepreneur probably identifies with having that shiny object syndrome for sure. Yeah, it's been an evolution. I have my first international retreat coming up actually in Costa Rica, where the water pressure is standing, because I've been to that venue.
Good luck, Sam.
Yeah, no,
good luck.
Good luck. Yeah. No, I love Costa Rica. I have a special place in my heart for Costa Rica. But yeah, 2019 did ayahuasca. I started to be like, all right, I got to do something else. Right. And I had several podcasts at the time, and I pretty much axed all of those and started the Soul Seeker podcast as a way to just meet other people and go deeper into something that felt in more alignment. From there, in 2020, I joined a mastermind called Fit for Service, and then the world shut down. And I subsequently traveled more than I ever did in my life, because I was part of this mastermind where we were still doing events and things like that. And for 2 years there, from 2020 to 2021, for the most part, I wasn't home for 4 weeks straight for like 2 years. And this mastermind was called Fit for Service. It was all about like giving you the tools to become fit so that you could serve. And it was an incredible experience. It was so amazing. The one piece it didn't really hit on was like how to be of service. It was all about like preparing for service. And then I was like, okay, now what? Then a yoga teacher training came into my field synchronistically, where again, I was like, I don't know why I'm saying yes to going to Costa Rica in 2 weeks to do a yoga teacher training, because I love yoga, but I have zero interest in teaching yoga. And, yeah, I did that. And by the second day, I was like, okay, I need to show up different. I need to act as if I want to be a teacher, because I'm just kind of going through the motions. And by like the fourth day, I was like, no, yeah, I want to teach when I go home. So in January of 2022, I started teaching yoga back home. I started leading a men's group. I published my fourth book, Soul Life Balance. Then I got into speaking, and it's all breadcrumb trail, right? Just learning to follow the intuition, not necessarily knowing why, but I went to a boot camp for like new and established keynote speakers so that they can excel as well. And at that boot camp, it all kind of clicked for me. I was like, I don't know why I was teaching yoga, but now it makes sense, because I was so scared to teach yoga at my home studio, feeling like an imposter, because one, it's an amazing studio. Two, I'm a male and I have that conditioning of like, who am I to teach and blah, 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 all of that, right? And three, I'm not the most flexible person anyways. Like where I leaned on was like the insights and the philosophy and the meditation and the breath work. So when I started getting into keynote speaking, it wasn't that hard, because teaching yoga already prepared me to speak in front of other people. And then I did breathwork training, and the psychedelic integration coaching came in. So yeah, there's all these different things, right? And where I'm at now is like the main thing I want to do is speeches, keynote speeches. And I have what's called my Breath Club, which is like a monthly subscription, a community model where every week I'm teaching the people within the community how to regulate their nervous system through breath work. So my 1-2 punch right now that I'm focusing on is like it's keynotes and the Breath Club. And then we'll see how this first retreat in Costa Rica goes, but at least once a year, I would love to do it twice a year. So I'm starting to like lessen it, because it is kind of like, oh, let me try this, let me try that, all these different things. But I have clarity now. It just took a while.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Oh, yeah. You owe me a Sunday.
Thanks. I was going to ask Sam about the breath work part. I think when people hear breath work, so I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner, do lots of psychotherapy with folks. And one of the things that I always bring up is breath work, regulating your breath to help regulate, like you said, your nervous system. But for some reason, it's got a bad rap. Like people just like don't think that it works, or, the thing that I always hear is that I've tried doing deep breaths. That doesn't work for me, and there's all these different methods to try out there, but sometimes it can be tough to kind of get over that initial hump with folks of, you've tried it before, but maybe you haven't tried it this way, right? And so how do you, without going too deep into your process, but how do you help people to come to the breath work and understand the importance of it, but also be willing to give it a try, right? There's all these different ways of doing it. There's the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. There's the Wim Hof, if you're trying to stay in cold water, right? There's that way of breathing, and there's the yoga breath. And so how do you kind of teach that to folks, but also, tell us a little bit about what your methodology looks like?
Yeah, the breath work, like I'll just call it industry, has an identity crisis, right?
Yeah.
Because breath work has been around for thousands of years. We could look at pranayama, prana meaning life, life force energy, and yama meaning control, breath control, and that's 1/8 of what yoga is about. Anyways, though, I typically like to define breathwork in 2 categories. There's one, breathwork exercises. Most of us are familiar with different sorts of breathwork exercises. And my definition of that category is it's doing something to help shift us into rest and digest, the parasympathetic nervous system. Yeah. Now, what's really been coming on the scene recently are breathwork journeys. And this is something that's been around for, or maybe it's been 50 years in terms of like the journeys. I don't know if the ancient yogis did journeys like this, but the breathwork journeys are actually to shift us into fight or flight. And it's to stimulate that fight or flight response, because we can imagine gazelle getting chased by a lion, right? And if that gazelle is lucky enough to get away, what does it do? It kind of shakes and convulses because it's allowing itself to process that trauma it just experienced in the moment. But as humans, we're told from a very young age, like think of a child having a temper tantrum, don't do that. So we learn to constrict, we learn to tighten and contract. And as Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor said in her TED Talk in 2008, which got her to be named to Time's top 100 most influential people back in 2008, our bodies have a 90-second physiological response when we experience an emotion. And emotions are energy in motion. So I kind of teach all of this and some other stuff, but the purpose of doing a breathwork journey is that it gets the ego identity of self out of the way so that the body can release all the different energies and traumas that it's experienced. And, that it typically would be known as like holotropic. They're kind of the big boys, the big brand in the industry, but there's a lot of different ways to do a quote unquote breathwork journey. Now, I'll say that I think for anyone in this world, one breathwork journey a year as like an annual check-in, checkup, maintenance is a fantastic idea. If we could all have that. That alone is like a psychedelic experience and can lead to a spiritual awakening. Just this breathwork journey, for sure. Then the breathwork exercises come in as like the daily maintenance. And that opens up a whole nother can of worms. Like, okay, so what does that mean? Because if we're just talking about like, oh, I tried taking a deep breath when I was triggered and it doesn't work for me. If all you're doing is, or whatever it is, it's probably not going to work for you, right? And Dr. Andrew Huberman speaks on the cyclic sigh. The lab at Stanford did a study that compared different forms of breathwork and meditation to see what would be most effective to alleviate stress and anxiety in the moment and then throughout your day as well. And they found that something called the cyclic sigh, which is an inhale through the nose all the way up, sipping in a bit more air at the top, and then through the mouth, sighing it out. is more effective than anything else to relieve stress and anxiety. And you can do that for 5 minutes and practice that. So that's usually one of the foundational ones I'll teach, along with the 6-step breath process, which teaches what to do in those 90 seconds that your body is having this physiological response.
Amazing. Yeah. I usually say that to people. I'm like, you probably weren't doing it right. Let me see how you take a deep breath. And it's exactly as you describe. People go, right? It's like, let's work on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that I see sometimes is that people only try to use their breath in that moment of panic, right? Or in that moment of distress, and they haven't taken the time to practice it outside of that moment. And I think that's a critical mistake that people make, not realizing it, that you really have to practice when you're not upset, when you're not anxious, when you haven't just come through some sort of a trauma, so that your body now has that memory of how to utilize your breath in an appropriate way.
Yeah.
And to your point, Christy, one of the top things that I teach people is this ninja style of breath work, where like most of us are thinking about what we're going to say next, and we have all these circling thoughts and we're never actually present. So if you can build awareness of, oh, I really want to cut this person off, or I'm no longer paying attention because I just want to hear what they're going to say next. Inhale up, sip in a bit more air, and then through the nose, exhale. Not the cyclic side with the mouth, the nose. You want to do it subtle, right? But if we start to focus on our breath, there's a few things it's doing there. One, it helps to alleviate those circling thoughts so that you can be more present with that other person. And two, it's retraining your nervous system to breathe in a way so that you can be in a more ongoing state of rest and digest, whereas most of us are constantly in fight or flight.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here breathing.
I know, me too.
All right.
I'm way too calm to host this right now.
So Sam, can you talk a bit about your book, and is this what your most recent book focuses on? Are there other topics that are in the book?
Yeah, this book is called Overcome the Overwhelm, the 6-step breath process to access inner peace. It was born out of the most challenging time in my life last year, and me needing to go deeper on my own work and figuring out a system that would work for me. And then I started sharing it with clients. It's centered around the 6-step breath process, but there's a ton of topics in there. Like we talk about the conscious mind, subconscious mind, shadow work, Carl Jung's work, science. But at the end of the day, like it's all about rewiring the subconscious mind, regulating the nervous system, and integrating, finding daily practices that work for you without approaching it as a to-do list, because a lot of times people will approach their mindfulness and or spiritual practices as if it's a to-do list, which gets someone back into the doing, whereas the whole point is to find the being.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm gonna have to read it. It's out, right? We can.
Yeah.
Where can we get it? Amazon?
Yeah, you can find it on Amazon. Overcome the Overwhelm. It's been out since May of 2024, so this year. And the 6 steps, I'll give them to you real quick. The first one, B, is breathe to slow down. So you notice the triggers coming on, breathe to slow down. In this one, this is typically where I teach what breath work is, the 3 rules of breath work, and a few simple exercises. The R is relax to feel. This is like, hey, let me relax into what I'm feeling and let me just soften, right? E is energy to reveal. This is where we really kick up a notch into the shadow work of being like, okay, so if emotions are energy in motion, what are these energies revealing to me? What is the lesson? What is the story that's coming through? Then the A is accept to surrender, because typically what happens is when we start to get that story that's being revealed to us, what do? We say, oh no, I don't want to see that. I don't have time to, and no, we don't want it. So we have to accept it. And that's the shadow work. Then we earn the right to move into the fifth step, transform into empowering beliefs. And this is where we earn the right to invoke the power of positive thinking. And I talk a little bit there about, this false movement of toxic positivity, where they're just shoving things down, compartmentalizing, and never opening that box. The final step is habits to integrate. As a result of this, what new habits and actions and behaviors am I going to take? So that's a lot. So I tell people, remember this, if anything else. Emotions are energy in motion. Takes your body 90 seconds to process those energies. And in those 90 seconds, breathe, feel, then think intentionally. And that is the whole 6-step breath process summarized.
Amazing. That is so great. I cannot wait to read it. And I have a couple people in mind that I'm going to send it to. Immediately, I was like,
I have more than a couple.
Yeah. That comment about toxic positivity, really is something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. KG and I often talk a lot about manifesting and, saying positive things and bringing it to light. I think sometimes, especially when people are dealing with really challenging things in their lives, it can feel like toxic positivity, right? Because it's like, okay, yeah, example, I'm going to try to manifest $1 million this year, but like right now I'm $500,000 in debt, and like debt collectors keep calling me. So that's not helping me, right? And so, what would you say to people in terms of differentiating from toxic positivity to, actually thinking positively in order to propel yourself towards the future that you envision?
Yeah, to answer that, we probably should talk about shadow work. And Carl Jung coined the term the shadow, and the shadow basically means to make what's not known to conscious awareness. Or said another way, our subconscious or unconscious, whichever you prefer, makes up 95% of our awareness. And that is the awareness we don't actually have access to. There's over 2 million bits of information that we process in any given second. And because of our subconscious, it distorts and it generalizes and it deletes most of that, so that our conscious awareness only receives 126 bits of information out of that 2 million in any given second. So with all of that being said, what this is really about is shadow work. Where are we ignoring or not willing to see something? Shadow work is very, very simple. Like if you're quote unquote doing the work in any capacity, you're doing shadow work, right? It's that simple. But any single time when we're like, oh no, I don't want to open that up, I don't want to see that, we're no longer doing the shadow work. So if we're trying to manifest money and we know that we're broke and we're having all these different things, are we just being like, no, I'm going to pretend like I'm not broke and I'm not going to do that? Or are we saying, okay, yes, I'm having financial issues here, whatever, that's not the best way to say it, but like this is reality. I am taking appropriate and aligned action in integrity to make the most out of that. And also I'm going to focus on the positive. I think on the other side of the coin with shadow work, there's a lot of spiritual people that just get addicted to shadow work, where they're blocking themselves because they're staying in that frequency of always doing the work. So this is why my message is soul life balance. Soul being the yin, the feminine, life being the yang, the masculine. We need both, right? And there's a time and place for it all. So one of my favorite movies I've seen is Barbie, of all movies. I thought it was absolutely a masterclass on the spiritual journey. And if Barbie had said, no spoilers here because this happens pretty early in the movie, and but basically, like you both saw it, right?
Yeah. I did not. I have yet to see Barbie.
I don't know what her problem is.
You got to see it. It's so good. It's so good. You even have like the Barbie colored color on your background there, the pink purple-ish.
Yeah, let's not go down the line of the amount of pink clothing that this girl wears on this podcast.
Oh, well then, yeah, Barbie's coming for you. But the long story short of it is like she's malfunctioning, right? And she could go into a lane of toxic positivity.
Yeah.
But she chooses to do her own work. She chooses to do shadow work. And the whole movie is about shadow work. And that's why I love it. I did a 30-minute breakdown of the movie on YouTube, and YouTube blocked it like 10 times. And I'm like, come on, YouTube.
Why?
Haters is right. Yeah. But no, in all seriousness, like toxic positivity is a huge challenge right now, because there is a movement, and there are teachers as well. One of my yoga teacher trainers said, never entertain a negative thought or feeling.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there like, no, I don't agree with that. Which
that's not realistic.
yeah, exactly. So yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's awesome. Well, we have some questions that we ask our guests at the end of each one of our episodes. So if you don't mind, we'd like to ask you a few as we round down. And now my dog is going to act up. Hey. He found a toy. So the first question is, we live in such a fast-paced world where small moments of joy and gratitude can often be overlooked. We call them glimmers. What are some of your glimmers?
That I overlook, or the moments I love?
The moments that you love, the like small fleeting moments of joy that happen in your life every day.
I travel a lot, but when I'm home, I go to the ocean every day. And, whether it's even if it's not the ocean, the birds, I'm very connected with the birds, or even noticing this, the subtle shift in the wind. Sometimes, like, when you're just, thought happens or something happens and the wind responds in a certain way, those little moments of being in nature, whether it's the messengers like the snake I saw today, or a couple days ago, a gopher coming in and out of his hole, and then me being like, let me feel into what this messenger is saying to me before I go onto Google to type in gopher spiritual meaning, because I will do that, but I will think about what it means to me first.
I do that all the time.
Yeah.
I'm like, cardinal on a Sunday, spiritual meaning.
Yeah, right. Let me get really specific there. On a Sunday afternoon. Yeah.
That's awesome. Those are great glimmers. And I love the connection to nature. That's really important. And I think leads into some of the questions that we have here. But the next question that we have is, what would you say to someone who is struggling with their mental health right now?
Oh, well, that's a big one, right? It depends what's going on, but I mean, at the end of the day, for me, shadow work. If you are someone who is quote unquote doing the work, that's different than if you're not already doing the work. So assuming that it's someone that's doing the work, then the thing that's helped me personally the most is adopting a game time mentality. And what that's about is, like I alluded to, last year being the most challenging time in my life. So what the mentality I had to adopt, or I chose to adopt, is if I'm learning about doing all this work, am I just learning it in theory, or is it now, hey, it's game time, now's the time to put it to use? And that's what helps me to accept and surrender, so that I can go deeper into what I'm being called to face in any given moment.
Great.
One of the things that we know is that the stigma around mental health is very real. We often say that it's alive and well. You can almost feel the pulse of it. And so I'm wondering if there are any things that you do to try to encourage open conversations or ways to break the stigma around mental health.
Whew.
We don't ask easy questions in this speakeasy.
Yeah. Every day I'm about it. I just let it brush off at this point. A few years ago, when I first got started into like speaking about spirituality and mental health, my Instagram bio said recovering bro, because I felt like I needed to like be like, hey, like I wasn't always this way. At this point, it's just who I am. And I've heard a few times recently this year of either family members or close friends thinking that I'm weird or this or that. And I'm like, I had no idea that you guys were saying that behind my back, but that's all good. Like, okay, whatever, because
not cool, people, not cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to be said about stepping into your truth, owning your truth, and really walking in alignment with it versus, kind of being like, oh, I'm a little bit afraid, right? You're still not really, you're dimming your light in that situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it sounds like you walking in your truth and staying on this path is how you help with the stigma issue. Right?
Yeah, well said. Yeah. Thanks for interpreting what I said.
No, just making sure I got it. I understood what you were saying. Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, cool. So many people struggle with maintaining work-life balance and having a significant impact on their mental health. What's your favorite boundary to manage this in your life?
The reframe of soul life balance from work life balance. I did a TED talk earlier this year titled, I think it's the title, The Illusion of Work Life Balance, the mental health myth of work life balance or something like that. I think work life balance, just an executive summary, it's double yang, it's double masculine energy. And we also speak about it as if it's this end destination. So being disconnected from the feminine, the spiritual, the yin energy is an issue there. The subliminal programming of putting work before life, not life work balance, is another issue with it. And then the final one is when we think and feel and think. Yeah, I said think. When we think and feel about it, it's like it's this end destination, whereas soul life balance is a practice of being like, hey, we are in the journey itself.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
What a great answer. I almost fell off my chair.
I know. Life work balance.
Life work balance. Yes. Like what?
Yeah, that's the subliminal programming, because think about it. If the W is closer to the Z, it should be the second word. It's almost always the letter that's closer to the A that's first. It was intentional.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true. I mean, I definitely feel like I am always striving for life work balance. But living in a world where it's the other way around is very challenging.
What a gem. Wow.
Requires a lot of boundary setting.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Our final question. We know how much you believe in breathwork. But outside of that, what is your favorite self-care strategy that you recommend for people to try, and why?
Journaling. Journaling is that thing for me that I often don't do because, look, I've written 6 books at this point. I clearly like to write, but to write for myself and not have someone else to do it is such a challenge. And every time, I still have this piece of programming that I'm working with where it's like, oh no, I need to be efficient, be productive. If I'm going to be writing, it's like a blog, it's a book, it's a social post. I'm not writing for me, right? But when I come back to the tougher times in my life, when I'm going through something hard where I need clarity, journaling is the form of channeling that any person can do. You will find the answer that you're looking for if you just take the time and space to truly journal. Like, it is wild how things come out through journaling.
Agree.
Totally.
100%.
Wow. This has been an amazing conversation, Sam. I'm so glad that we connected and were able to find the time to make this happen.
Thank you both. Yeah, I've been having a lot of fun. This was a lively conversation, and thank you so much for having me on the show and all the great work both of you are doing in the world.
Absolutely. We got to have you back, Sam. You're doing so many things. I feel like we just scraped the surface. So thank you so much.
Anytime. Yeah, let me know. I'd love to. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.
So that was an amazing conversation. Sam was just dropping gems all over the place.
Yeah. So many amazing tips and lessons, and I can't wait to read his book. I've been looking for a good book to read. I'm not usually like a self-help book type of person, and I don't think his book is self-help, but I usually like the fantasy, I'm a Harry Potter girl,
Yeah.
But fiction, but I definitely want to read his book. And
so we will absolutely drop the link for his book, Overcome the Overwhelm, the 6-step breath process to access inner peace, in our show notes, as well as the link to his website, which is his name, SamKabert.com. We'll also put that in the description of the show, and you can access not only all 6 of his books, but all of the other amazing things that Sam talked about that he has done, is doing. You can book him for a keynote. You heard that's what his goal is. Lift him up and have him for a keynote speaker, and invite us to come too.
Yeah, exactly. I was gonna say. Yeah. And I think Meditation Minute is coming up, and you could try some of the breathwork techniques that we talked about today. Well, you listen if you choose to do so. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
And
don't forget
to rate, subscribe, and review, and tell a friend to tell a friend.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next time.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.